The luxurious hum of a first-class cabin on an international flight was typically a cocoon of tranquility. Plush seats, soft murmurs, and the clink of champagne glasses created an atmosphere of serene indulgence. Among the well-dressed passengers seated that day was a young man who looked slightly out of place. He had an air of quiet confidence, but his youthful features and casual attire stood in sharp contrast to the more seasoned travelers in designer suits and couture dresses. Unbeknownst to many around him, this was Barron Trump, the youngest son of one of the most recognizable political families in the world. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. It started innocuously enough. A subtle glance here, a whispered remark there. The man seated 2 rows behind Barron, a brash, middle-aged businessman named Carl, had taken immediate notice of the teenager. Carl's success had afforded him a measure of arrogance that he wielded with little consideration for others. As the flight progressed, his disdainful murmurs grew louder, accompanied by frequent sneers in Barron's direction. The source of his irritation was unclear. Perhaps it was the young man's composed demeanor, or the way the flight attendants seemed to treat him with an extra layer of respect. Barron, however, remained oblivious, engrossed in a book resting on his tray table. He seemed unbothered by the bustling of the cabin or the occasional side-eye from passengers curious about his identity. But Carl's disdain was not to be contained. When the flight attendant stopped by to refill Barron's water glass, Carl saw his chance to speak. "You know," Carl said loudly enough for several rows to hear, "it's amazing how anyone can just buy their way into first class these days. Back in my time, you earned it." Heads turned. The words carried an unmistakable weight of condescension. Barron glanced up briefly, his face calm but slightly puzzled. Choosing not to engage, he returned to his book, but the atmosphere around him had shifted. Encouraged by the lack of a response, Carl continued, addressing the air but clearly targeting the teenager. "I guess when your parents have more money than sense, you can skip the hard work part. Probably doesn't even know what a real job looks like." A few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others, recognizing Barron's face, exchanged worried glances. It was evident that Carl either didn't realize who he was insulting or simply didn't care. Barron's youthful restraint was remarkable. He didn't so much as flinch. Instead, he turned a page in his book, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Carl, emboldened by what he perceived as submission, leaned forward. "What are you reading, kid? A coloring book?" His tone was dripping with mockery, and a few passengers gasped softly at his audacity. Barron finally looked up. Meeting Carl's gaze for the first time, his voice, calm and measured, broke the tension. "Actually, it's a biography of Winston Churchill. I find his leadership during challenging times inspiring." The reply was polite, but sharp enough to draw a few murmurs of approval from nearby passengers. Carl, however, was not ready to back down. "Churchill, huh? Well, I'm sure you've had plenty of challenges growing up with a silver spoon in your mouth. Let me guess, Daddy's paying for this flight?" This time, the smirk on Barron's face was unmistakable, but he remained composed. The flight attendant, sensing the escalating tension, approached Carl and politely asked if he needed anything to drink. He waved her off, his focus still locked on the young man in front of him. "What's your name, kid, or do you prefer your highness?" Carl sneered, drawing an awkward chuckle from a passenger or two. Barron leaned back in his seat, closing his book with deliberate calm. "It's Barron. Barron Trump." The cabin seemed to freeze for a moment, the weight of the name crashing down like a thunderclap. Carl's smug expression faltered as the realization dawned on him. For a split second, Carl hesitated. Then, as if trying to regain control of the situation, he laughed nervously. "Oh, so you're that Trump. Guess it runs in the family, huh? Traveling in style while the rest of us actually work for a living." Barron, unfazed, looked directly at Carl. His voice remained steady, but there was a quiet intensity behind his words. "I didn't ask for this seat, mister." He paused, raising an eyebrow. "I'm sorry. I don't believe I caught your name." The subtle dig didn't go unnoticed by the passengers, and a ripple of restrained amusement passed through the cabin. Carl shifted uncomfortably, muttering his name under his breath. Barron continued, his tone polite but firm. "I'm here because I was invited to speak at an international youth summit. We're discussing strategies for global education reform. I imagine that's something you care deeply about, given your obvious passion for hard work." The remark landed like a well-aimed dart. Carl's face turned an unflattering shade of red, and his bravado visibly crumbled. Before he could muster a response, an older woman seated nearby interjected, her tone sharp. "Young man, you've shown more grace and maturity in the past 10 minutes than some people do in a lifetime. Don't let this rude man ruin your journey." A murmur of agreement rippled through the cabin, and several passengers nodded approvingly. Carl, now the clear villain in the unfolding drama, shrank back into his seat, his earlier confidence replaced by a sullen silence. The flight attendant returned, this time addressing Barron with a warm smile. "Mr. Trump, is there anything I can get you?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Barron shook his head politely, thanking her for her attentiveness. As the hours passed, the tension in the cabin dissipated, replaced by a newfound admiration for the young man who had handled the situation with such poise. Carl, meanwhile, remained uncharacteristically quiet, avoiding eye contact with anyone around him. When the plane finally landed and the passengers began to disembark, Carl hesitated as he gathered his belongings. As Barron stood to retrieve his carry-on, Carl approached him, his earlier arrogance replaced by an awkward humility. "Listen, kid," Carl began, his voice low. "I didn't realize who you were. I guess I shouldn't have said all that. You handled it well." Barron regarded him thoughtfully for a moment before offering a small, genuine smile. "Thank you for saying that, but you should know it doesn't matter who someone is. Respect should never depend on a name." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Carl nodded, unable to find the right response, and shuffled off the plane. Barron, meanwhile, walked calmly through the jet bridge, his book tucked under one arm and his dignity intact. The incident would later become a talking point among the passengers, a tale of an entitled man brought low by a teenager's grace and wit. For Barron Trump, it was just another moment of navigating life under the spotlight, a reminder that true strength lies not in the name you carry, but in the way you carry yourself. As Barron Trump stepped into the terminal, the atmosphere was buzzing with the usual blend of hurried travelers, flight announcements, and the rhythmic hum of rolling suitcases. The recent confrontation on the plane had left an impression not only on those who had witnessed it firsthand, but also on Barron himself. While his outward demeanor remained composed, the exchange with Carl lingered in his mind. He had grown used to navigating such situations, but every encounter was a test of patience, maturity, and resolve. As he walked toward the baggage claim, a few passengers from the flight approached him discreetly. An older couple caught up with him, their expressions warm and appreciative. "You handled yourself beautifully back there," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm Richard, and this is my wife, Eleanor. We just wanted to say we were impressed by your composure." Barron shook his hand with a polite smile. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say," Eleanor chimed in, her voice tinged with admiration. "I don't know many young men your age who could have kept their cool in the face of such hostility. You have a bright future ahead of you, Barron." He nodded graciously, thanked them, and continued on his way. Though the interaction was brief, it left him feeling buoyed. Moments like these reminded him that despite the scrutiny and pressure that came with his family name, there were still people who saw him as more than just a headline or a symbol of political division. As he approached the baggage carousel, a few others from the flight whispered among themselves while casting occasional glances his way. One man, dressed in a sharp business suit, eventually worked up the courage to approach him. "I just wanted to apologize on behalf of, well, people like that guy on the plane," the man said, gesturing vaguely. "It's not fair that you're subjected to that kind of treatment just because of your family." Barron gave a small shrug. "Thank you, but it's okay. I've learned that people often project their frustrations onto others. It says more about them than it does about me." The man looked genuinely impressed. "You're wise beyond your years. Keep that mindset, it'll take you far." After retrieving his luggage, Barron made his way toward the car service that had been arranged to pick him up. Outside the terminal, a sleek black SUV awaited him. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, stepped out to greet him. "Mr. Trump, welcome. I'm Jack. I'll be taking you to your hotel," he said, opening the door for him. Barron thanked him and settled into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the airport, he gazed out the window, watching the city unfold before him. It was a bustling metropolis, full of life and energy. He thought about the upcoming youth summit, where he was scheduled to deliver a speech on education reform. The topic was one he was passionate about, and he had spent weeks preparing his remarks. He wanted to ensure that his words resonated with the audience, many of whom were leaders in their own right. In the quiet of the car, Barron allowed himself a moment to reflect. The incident on the plane had been a stark reminder of the challenges he faced as a public figure. It wasn't just about representing himself, it was also about representing his family and, to some extent, the country. He knew that every action he took and every word he spoke would be scrutinized. But rather than feeling burdened by this reality, he saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate that he could rise above the noise and focus on what truly mattered. The following morning, Barron arrived at the conference venue, a sprawling convention center buzzing with activity. Delegates from around the world had gathered, each bringing their unique perspectives and experiences. As he entered the main hall, he felt a surge of anticipation. This was his chance to contribute to a meaningful dialogue about education and the role it played in shaping the future. His speech was scheduled for later in the day, but Barron made it a point to attend several panels and workshops beforehand. He listened intently as experts discussed topics ranging from digital literacy to equitable access to education. He took notes, asked thoughtful questions, and engaged in conversations with fellow attendees. It was clear to those around him that he wasn't there to simply make an appearance. He was genuinely invested in the issues at hand. When the time for his speech arrived, the room was filled to capacity. Delegates, journalists, and onlookers eagerly awaited his address. Barron approached the podium with a calm confidence that belied his age. He took a moment to survey the audience before beginning. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steady and clear. "It's an honor to be here among so many passionate and dedicated individuals. Today I want to talk about a subject that transcends borders, politics, and ideologies: education." As he spoke, it became evident that he had done his homework. He cited statistics, shared anecdotes, and outlined practical solutions for improving education systems worldwide. He emphasized the importance of critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration in preparing students for the challenges of the modern world. But what struck the audience most was his sincerity. He spoke not as a politician's son, but as a young person who cared deeply about the future. "I believe that education is the foundation upon which we build our dreams and aspirations," he said toward the end of his speech. "It is a tool that empowers us to question, innovate, and create, but it is also a responsibility, a commitment to ensuring that no one is left behind. Together, we have the power to shape a future where every child has access to the opportunities they deserve." The room erupted into applause as he concluded, and Barron stepped back from the podium, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and pride. Over the next few days, he received praise from attendees, many of whom expressed their admiration for his thoughtful and articulate remarks. But what meant the most to him were the conversations he had with young delegates who shared their own stories and ideas. It was a reminder that change wasn't just about words, it was about action and collaboration. As the conference came to a close, Barron found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. The incident on the plane, though unpleasant, had been a small moment in the grander scheme of things. What mattered most was how he chose to move forward, to focus on the positive, to rise above negativity, and to contribute to something greater than himself. When he boarded the flight back home, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin felt markedly different. This time, there were no pointed remarks or disdainful glances. Instead, the passengers seemed to regard him with a newfound respect, a testament to the impression he had left on those who had seen him in action. As the plane ascended into the sky, Barron opened his book and settled in for the journey. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments that would test his character and resilience, but he also knew that he was ready for them. With each passing day, he was carving out his own path, one step at a time, guided by the values that mattered most to him: integrity, humility, and a commitment to making a difference. The plane ride home gave Barron Trump the chance to reflect on what had been a transformative experience. He leaned back in his seat, staring out at the endless expanse of clouds that stretched across the horizon. The youth summit had been a success, and the sense of accomplishment from his speech still resonated within him. Yet he couldn't shake the thought of how differently things could have gone. The moment on the initial flight with Carl had revealed more to him than just the challenges of being a public figure. It had exposed the complexities of human interaction and how prejudice could so easily cloud perception. As the hours passed, Barron considered the layers of expectation that surrounded him. Being a member of the Trump family came with inherent privileges, but it also came with challenges that were often invisible to others. People assumed he had an easy life, filled with luxury and devoid of hardship. Few paused to think about what it meant to grow up in a world where every move was scrutinized, where every misstep could become front-page news. Barron, however, had come to view these challenges not as burdens but as opportunities to build resilience. Upon landing back in the United States, he was greeted by his security detail, who escorted him to a waiting car. As they navigated through the city streets, Barron's thoughts turned to the upcoming weeks. The Youth Summit had sparked a new sense of purpose in him. The connections he had made with fellow delegates and activists had left him inspired, and he felt a strong desire to continue the work they had started together. But he also knew that change couldn't happen in isolation. He needed to involve himself more deeply in the communities that could benefit from his efforts. That evening, sitting at his desk in his New York home, Barron began drafting plans. He wanted to create an initiative focused on providing underserved schools with resources for digital education. Access to technology was something he had taken for granted, but the summit had highlighted how many children lacked even basic tools for learning in the modern world. He decided to reach out to a few of the contacts he had made during the summit. These were people who had experience in grassroots organizing, nonprofit management, and educational reform. If there was one thing Barron had learned, it was the importance of collaboration. He might have ideas, but it would take a collective effort to bring them to life. Over the next few days, Barron worked tirelessly. He scheduled meetings, sent emails, and consulted with experts in the field of education. Slowly but surely, a vision began to take shape. The initiative, which he tentatively named Tomorrow's Classroom, would focus on equipping schools with laptops, internet access, and training programs for teachers to integrate technology into their curriculum. He envisioned a future where students in rural and urban areas alike could connect with the world in ways that had previously been out of reach. While Barron was making progress on the initiative, the memory of the incident with Carl on the plane continued to weigh on him. He felt that it represented something larger than a simple case of rudeness. It symbolized the assumptions and prejudices that people often carried without realizing it. Barron decided that part of his work would also focus on fostering empathy and understanding among young people. With that in mind, he incorporated a second component into the initiative, workshops designed to teach students about communication, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking. He believed these skills were just as important as academic knowledge, if not more so. The ability to engage with others respectfully and thoughtfully was a cornerstone of building a better society. News of Barron's efforts began to spread. At first it was a trickle, mentions in educational forums and small news outlets. But as the initiative gained traction, larger media organizations picked up the story. Journalists marveled at how the youngest member of the Trump family was stepping out of the shadows and forging his own path. Interviews were requested, and while Barron was reluctant to put himself in the spotlight, he recognized the importance of using his platform to amplify the message. During one of these interviews, Barron was asked about the incident with Carl. The journalist, a seasoned interviewer with a knack for drawing out candid responses, probed gently. "Barron, you've been commended for the way you handled that moment on the flight, but I wonder, how did it really make you feel?" Barron paused, choosing his words carefully. "Honestly, it wasn't the first time I've faced that kind of situation, and I doubt it'll be the last. But what I felt most wasn't anger or frustration. It was curiosity. I wondered what made him so quick to judge me without knowing anything about me. That's part of why I'm so passionate about this initiative. I think education, both academic and emotional, can help bridge those gaps in understanding." The interviewer nodded, clearly impressed by the thoughtfulness of his response. "Do you think that's the key to overcoming prejudice?" "I think it's one of the keys," Barron replied. "We can't control how people think or feel, but we can give them tools to question their assumptions and see the world through someone else's eyes. The interview became a sensation, shared widely on social media and praised for its depth. People from all walks of life reached out to express their support, and donations to Tomorrow's Classroom began pouring in. Barron, however, remained focused on the work itself. For him, the praise was secondary to the impact he hoped to make. Months turned into a year, and Tomorrow's Classroom blossomed into a thriving organization. Pilot programs were launched in schools across the country, and the results were promising. Students who had once struggled to keep up were now excelling with the help of technology. Teachers reported that the workshops on empathy and communication had transformed classroom dynamics, fostering a more inclusive and supportive environment. Barron made it a point to visit some of these schools personally. He wanted to see the impact firsthand and hear directly from the students and teachers who were participating in the program. During one such visit to a rural school in the Midwest, he was struck by the enthusiasm of the students. They crowded around him, eager to show off their projects and share their dreams. One girl, no older than 10, tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Trump, do you think I could be a scientist one day?" Barron knelt down to her level, looking her in the eyes. "Absolutely. You can be anything you want to be. Just keep working hard and believing in yourself." Moments like these reinforced his commitment to the cause. He saw the potential in these children and knew that the work he was doing was about more than just providing resources. It was about instilling hope and ambition. Meanwhile, Carl, the man from the plane, had also been following the news about Barron's initiative. The story had reached him through a colleague, and as he read about the young man's efforts, he felt a pang of guilt. He thought back to that fateful flight, to the harsh words he had spoken without thought or reason. He realized that his assumptions had been entirely unfounded, and he was struck by Barron's grace in handling the situation. Motivated by a desire to make amends, Carl decided to reach out. He penned a heartfelt letter, apologizing for his behavior and expressing his admiration for the work Barron was doing. He admitted that his actions had been driven by his own insecurities and acknowledged the lesson he had learned from the encounter. Barron received the letter one evening and read it carefully. While he didn't hold a grudge, he was moved by Carl's willingness to take responsibility. He decided to write back, thanking Carl for his honesty and encouraging him to channel his newfound perspective into positive action. Their correspondence marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Over time, Carl became one of the initiative's most dedicated supporters, using his business acumen to help secure funding and resources for Tomorrow's Classroom. It was a testament to the idea that even the most challenging encounters could lead to growth and understanding. As the initiative continued to expand, Barron's vision only grew stronger. He began exploring ways to bring Tomorrow's Classroom to an international audience, partnering with organizations around the world to address educational disparities on a global scale. Each step forward was a reminder that meaningful change was possible, even in the face of skepticism and doubt. For Barron, the journey was far from over, but as he looked back on everything that had led him to this point, the challenges, the moments of doubt, and the lessons learned, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Every experience, whether positive or negative, had shaped him into the person he was becoming. And so, as he prepared for the next chapter of his life, Barron Trump carried with him a steadfast belief in the power of education, empathy, and resilience. It was a belief that would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead, lighting the path toward a brighter, more inclusive future. Barron Trump's journey with Tomorrow's Classroom was evolving beyond what he had initially envisioned. What had started as a small initiative aimed at improving access to technology in schools was now a movement gaining international traction. Requests for collaboration were coming from countries as far as Kenya, Brazil, and India, where the challenges of educational inequity were often magnified by poverty and underfunded systems. Barron felt a renewed sense of purpose as he began formulating a strategy to scale the initiative globally while maintaining its original mission of bridging gaps in education and fostering empathy. In preparation for this expansion, Barron began consulting with experts from various disciplines, including international development, policy reform, and cultural studies. He knew that exporting a solution meant more than just providing resources. It required understanding the unique needs of each community. This learning process humbled him further, reinforcing the idea that leadership was as much about listening as it was about acting. One pivotal moment came during a trip to a rural village in Kenya. Barron visited a school where students were sharing textbooks that were falling apart, and the classrooms lacked basic supplies. Despite the challenging conditions, the energy of the students was infectious. They greeted him with songs, laughter, and eager questions about his work. It was there, speaking to a group of students beneath the shade of a baobab tree, that Barron realized the universal power of education to ignite hope. Education isn't just about learning facts or passing tests, he told them. It's about unlocking potential, giving you the tools to create the life you imagine for yourself. The students' wide-eyed enthusiasm left a lasting impression on him. Inspired, Barron decided to integrate community-driven elements into the initiative, encouraging local educators and students to identify their own priorities and work collaboratively to solve problems. This approach ensured that tomorrow's classroom wasn't imposing solutions, but empowering communities to take charge of their educational futures. At the same time, Barron recognized the importance of storytelling. While numbers and data were critical to securing funding and measuring success, personal stories had the power to inspire action. He began documenting the experiences of students, teachers, and families who had benefited from the initiative. These stories became central to the initiative's outreach efforts, putting faces and voices to the cause. One such story was that of a young boy in Appalachia named Lucas. Before the program, Lucas had struggled in school due to a lack of resources and access to the internet. After receiving a laptop and participating in a coding workshop funded by the initiative, Lucas discovered a passion for technology. A year later, he won a statewide competition for a mobile app he developed to help farmers monitor crop health. His success became a rallying cry for the potential that could be unlocked through small, meaningful investments. As Barron's work gained momentum, so did his confidence in his role as a changemaker. He no longer saw his family name as a burden or shield, but as a tool, a platform he could use to amplify voices that deserved to be heard. His focus remained firmly on the future, one where education was a right, not a privilege, and where empathy and understanding could transform lives. As tomorrow's classroom grew into a global initiative, Barron Trump's leadership continued to evolve. He found himself increasingly focused on empowering others to take ownership of the program's mission. His vision expanded to include mentorship opportunities for students, pairing them with professionals in fields like technology, education, and the arts. These mentorships became a cornerstone of the initiative, bridging the gap between aspirations and tangible opportunities. In one particularly poignant moment, Barron received a letter from a young girl in rural India who had attended a workshop through the initiative. She wrote about how the access to technology had allowed her to study engineering concepts, a subject she had only dreamed of exploring before. Her gratitude and determination struck a deep chord with Barron. Her words reminded him why the work mattered, not just for statistics or accolades, but for the real lives transformed along the way. Through all this, Barron remained grounded. His commitment to listening, adapting, and learning from the communities he served became the heart of his leadership. He understood that meaningful change wasn't achieved through grand gestures, but through steady, persistent effort. Each success was a step toward his ultimate goal, a world where education and empathy knew no borders. As the years passed, Barron Trump's work with tomorrow's classroom became synonymous with meaningful innovation in global education. Recognizing the transformative power of public-private partnerships, he began collaborating with tech giants, philanthropic organizations, and local governments. These collaborations enabled the initiative to implement large-scale programs like satellite internet installations for remote areas and teacher training academies designed to equip educators with modern skills. One particularly groundbreaking project was a virtual exchange program that connected students from different parts of the world. Using augmented reality and video conferencing, students from vastly different cultures worked together on collaborative projects, from solving environmental challenges to developing new business ideas. This effort not only enhanced their technical abilities, but also fostered cross-cultural understanding. Barron believed that such initiatives prepared young minds to thrive in an interconnected world. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a man insulting Barron Trump on a first-class flight? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.